Number 11. The parasite that drives how careful you are behind the wheel. That is supposed to be you, your temperament, your prudence, your private decision to brake. But roughly half the human beings alive right now are carrying a single-celled parasite lodged inside their brain tissue. And the ones carrying Toxoplasma gondii are 2.65 times more likely to be involved in a serious or fatal car accident than people who are clean. The risk does not stay there. In carriers with the highest parasite loads, the chance of crashing climbs to as much as 16 times higher, a quiet recklessness installed by an organism too small to see. It is like finding out the steering wheel was never wired to your hand. That something the size of a fleck of dust has been nudging it the entire drive home. And you called that nudge your driving. The evolutionary story is almost elegant. The parasite needs to end up in the gut of a cat to reproduce, so it rewires its host to stop fearing predators. It makes infected rodents walk calmly toward the smell of a cat. The problem is the human version. Neuroscience cannot show the exact molecular path by which dormant cysts reach in and retune complex human judgment about danger. With no inflammation, no visible damage, nothing the scalpel can find. So the most basic thing you own, the will to stay alive, turns out not to be an ethical choice at all. It is a biological calculation, and something else is allowed to edit it. The driver was never fully in the seat. Number 10, the hand that doesn't obey your hands are servants, extensions of your intent, incapable of forming a plan you didn't give them. There are people whose hand does not agree. It is called alien hand syndrome. First documented in 1908, and patients describe it in the language of horror. One of their arms carries out deliberate, goal-directed movements against their conscious will. One hand buttons a shirt. The other follows behind, unbuttoning it. In the worst cases recorded, the alien hand has reached for the patient's own throat. And functional MRI shows the terrible part. These movements light up the motor cortex on their own, fully active, completely disconnected from the circuits that are supposed to hold the experience of deciding. Imagine a glove that learns to move while you sleep, except the glove is your skin, and the muscles answering it are yours, and the only thing missing is your permission. The damage is usually to the corpus callosum, the bridge between the two halves of the brain. Classic neurology calls it a disconnection syndrome. The left hemisphere loses the ability to suppress motor programs the other side is running. But that explanation quietly opens a worse question, and the science admits it cannot close it. How does coordinated, intelligent, goal-seeking behavior get built at all, with no unified commander, no single observer anywhere inside? The body has hidden agencies in it. They are not waiting for you. They are waiting for a single wire to fail. Number 9. The blind man who never hit a wall. To see is to know. Conscious sight is supposed to be the non-negotiable requirement, the thing the brain needs before it can steer a body through space. In 2008, a patient known only as TN, completely blind, both halves of his visual cortex destroyed by 2-stroke, was asked to walk down a corridor without his cane. The corridor was deliberately cluttered. Boxes, chairs, camera tripods scattered across his path. On video, TN twists his shoulders, sidesteps, threads between the obstacles with surgical precision, and reaches the end without touching a single one. Then he is told what he just did. He doesn't believe it. He insists he walked through total darkness, that he is blind, that he has no idea how his body did any of it. It is like watching someone read a book with their eyes sealed shut, and then watching them swear the pages were blank. The theory is that older, more primitive visual pathways survived. Routes running from the retina down to the superior colliculus, bypassing the cortex entirely, feeding navigation coordinates straight to the body. But that only sharpens the wound. No one can explain how a stream of information rich enough to dodge a tripod gets converted into precise movement without ever crossing into the awareness of the mind that thinks it is in charge. Conscious sight, it turns out, is a surface translation, a subtitle, and the body can walk the whole film without ever reading it. Number 8. the magnet that chooses for you when the choice is arbitrary, left hand or right hand. No reason either way. Surely that at least is free, pure preference, untouched by any machine. In 1992, volunteers were told to freely choose to lift their left or right index finger right after they heard a click. What they didn't know was that on some trials, a focal pulse of transcranial magnetic stimulation was fired into the motor area of one hemisphere. Under that invisible electromagnetic command, in responses faster than 200 milliseconds, the experimenters could bias which hand came up. And here is the part that should not sit comfortably. The volunteers, pushed by a magnet, still reported that they had chosen freely, spontaneously, of their own will. It is like a coin that has been weighted by someone else, landing exactly where they wanted, while the coin gives a speech about how it decided to come up heads. The physiology says the magnetic field simply tipped neurons that were already loading toward a decision below the threshold of awareness. Fine, but that leaves the real question untouched. Why does the conscious mind, handed obvious proof of an outside force, delete that force from the story and replace it with the word I? The feeling of choosing freely is not the choice. It is the lie consciousness tells to hide the fact that physics got there first. Number 7. The mouth that never moved. When you intend to speak and then you feel yourself speak, you take that as proof. Proof the act was yours, that you authored it. In 2009, surgeons placed electrodes directly onto the cortex of 7 patients awake under local anesthesia. When they stimulated the inferior parietal cortex with currents of up to 8 milliamps, the patients reported a sudden, urgent desire to move their lips, their hand. Push the current higher, and the patients swore, under no doubt at all, that they had actually spoken, that they had actually moved their fingers. The electrodes on the muscles recorded the truth. Nothing moved, zero motor activity, and then the experiment ran in reverse. Stimulating the premotor cortex, the patients performed full visible movements and flatly denied they had moved at all. It is like a flight simulator wired into your skull. A cockpit that lets you feel the plane bank and climb while the aircraft sits cold and motionless on the ground. Science guesses that the parietal cortex generates predictions of what an action should feel like, and that those predictions are the sensation of intending. But the mystery stands, immovable. How does the brain manufacture a complete experience of wanting and a complete experience of having done it out of nothing, while sealing the conscious mind away from the motor system entirely? The mind lives inside a simulator. It feels desires for movements that never happened and misses movements that did. Number 6, the interpreter that lies. When you explain why you did something, you assume you are reporting the truth, describing the real reasoning that ran before the act. Working with patients whose 2 hemispheres had been surgically cut apart, Michael Gazzaniga ran a now famous test. He flashed a snowy scene to the right hemisphere and a chicken's foot to the left. The patient's left hand pointed to a shovel, the right hand pointed to a chicken. Then he asked the patient, out loud, which only the left hemisphere can answer, why he had pointed to the shovel. Without a pause, the patient explained, "You need a shovel to clean out the chicken coop." The left hemisphere had no access to the snow. It had never seen it. So it invented a reason, instantly, confidently, and believed it completely. It is like a press secretary who never sits in on the meetings, walking to the podium and explaining decisions he wasn't told about. Fluent, certain, and wrong. Neuroscience named this system the interpreter, a module in the left hemisphere built to force a coherent story onto behavior it did not cause. And here is the line science will not cross because it cannot. In a healthy brain, with the hemispheres still joined, there is no way to tell which of your everyday reasons are real and which are fiction, the interpreter wrote after the fact. Your sense of who you are is a story, and the author has no idea what the rest of the building is actually doing. Number 5, the arm he swore was fine. The mind monitors the body. You assume that system is honest, that you always know with certainty what your own limbs can and cannot do. After a stroke in the right hemisphere, between 20% and 50% of patients develop something called anosognosia for hemiplegia. Their arm is paralyzed completely, and they deny it. Asked to tie their shoes, they offer absurd excuses, or they try, fail, and then erase the failure from memory minutes later, as if it never happened. V.S. Ramachandran documented patients who would look directly at a dead motionless arm and insist it had moved exactly as they planned. Here is where the brain offers a flicker of hope. Pour cold water into the patient's left ear, and suddenly, for a few minutes, the denial breaks. They know. They admit the arm is paralyzed. The truth comes flooding back, clear and complete. For those few minutes, it looks like reality wins. And then the water warms, the stimulus fades, and the brain reaches back over the truth and paints the illusion of control on top of it again. The patient forgets they ever knew. The brain would rather shatter your reasoning than admit it has lost control of your body. Given the choice between truth and ownership, it chooses ownership every time. Number 4, the thought that arrived late. Free will rests on a sequence everyone trusts. The intention comes first, and the intention is the force that moves the body. In 1999, an experiment called I Spy quietly inverted that sequence. Participants shared control of a computer mouse with a partner, secretly a Confederate, drifting it over a screen of images. Through headphones, the participants were primed with the name of a specific image just seconds before the Confederate forced the cursor to stop on that exact image. The participants had not moved it. The other person had. And yet, they reported again and again that they had willed the stop, that the choice had been theirs, freely made. It is like a passenger gripping a dead steering wheel in the back seat, feeling every turn the actual driver makes and stepping out convinced they drove. The theory says conscious will is not a cause at all. It is a verdict assembled backwards from 3 clues. The thought came before the act, the thought matched the act, and no obvious outside force was visible. When those line up, the brain stamps the act mine. But computational models of the mind cannot explain the choice underneath it, why the system would rather rewrite physical reality than admit it does not have continuous control over the body it lives in. The feeling that your mind caused the movement is not evidence that it did. It is a story the brain tells after the body has already acted. Number 3, the decision before the decider. The conscious urge to move is supposed to be the starting gun, the first event, the thing that fires, and then the nervous system obeys. In 1983, Benjamin Libet wired volunteers to an EEG and asked them to flex their wrist whenever they felt the urge and to note the exact instant that urge appeared. The brain told on itself. The unconscious preparation to move, the readiness potential, began on average 550 milliseconds before the muscle fired. But the conscious feeling of deciding to move showed up only 200 milliseconds before the action, which means the physical brain had already committed to the movement a full 350 milliseconds before the you was informed it was happening. It is like reading a text message and watching, in real time, your own fingers send a reply you never finished writing, and only afterward feeling the decision to write it. Now hold on, because here the door seems to open. Libet himself offered an escape. Maybe consciousness can't start the action, he said, but it can still stop it. A power of veto in the last 100 to 150 milliseconds. Free won't. The will saved at the last possible instant. For decades, this was the refuge. The brain proposes, but you, the conscious self, can still refuse. And then the refuge collapses, because the act of vetoing is itself a mental act. And every mental act, by Libet's own logic, must be preceded by its own unconscious build-up of electrical preparation. The veto needs a veto. There is no flaw. There is no first mover anywhere in the chain that isn't already pushed from behind. Every decision you make is the burial of an electrical process that started mechanically long before you arrive. Number 2, the 256 neurons that knew first. Your private choices feel sealed, spontaneous, hidden in a place no outside observer could possibly read until you act. In 2011, the neurosurgeon Itzhak Fried implanted electrodes deep inside the brains of 12 epilepsy patients and listened to individual cells fire. He found that the activity of just 256 neurons in the supplementary motor area and the anterior cingulate was enough to predict the patient's conscious decision to move a finger with better than 80% accuracy. And it could do this 700 milliseconds before the patient felt any urge to move at all. It is like a stadium crowd, voices joining one by one, where listening to a single section in the stands tells you the final score before the game has started. Neuroscience models the choice as a slow accumulation. Populations of neurons firing, stacking up, until the pile crosses a threshold and tips into action. The math works. What the math cannot answer is the part that matters. Why the threshold is built and crossed so predictably, so precisely, outside of consciousness, while the observer sits in the dark with no idea what their own brain is about to choose. Your most intimate decisions are not private. They are an open broadcast, and the machines watching the brain receive the signal before you do. Number 1, the 10 seconds you live behind. You believe the moment you decide is the moment it begins. That when your mind chooses left or right, this or that, the choice starts there with you at the instant you feel it. In 2008, John Dylan Haynes put volunteers inside a functional MRI scanner and asked them freely to press a button with the left or the right hand whenever they wished. Then he ran the blood flow patterns through a statistical classifier, and he found that the decision, the specific button, left or right, could be read out of the activity in the frontopolar cortex and the precuneus up to 10 full seconds before the person consciously knew what they had chosen. Sit with the size of that number. Not half a second, not a flicker. 10 seconds. Long enough to take a breath, to look up, to think I haven't decided yet, while the answer has already been written down somewhere behind your eyes, finished, waiting for you to catch up and call it yours. 2,500 years of human beings have asked what the self is. Every philosophy ever written about the will spans that entire history, and not one line of it has produced a single answer a neuroscientist would accept as evident. The scanner did in one afternoon what the libraries could not. It found the decision. It just found it in the wrong place, at the wrong time. Made by someone you will never meet. Because that is what the 10 seconds mean. The you that feels the choice is not the one making it. You are downstream. You are the last to know. Every decision you will ever call your own arrives already sealed. A recording of something the brain decided 10 seconds ago that you experience as it happens to you and then mistake for freedom. The tape is already playing. You are not the one pressing record. Number 1 was the easy one to film. Number 0 is the one nobody comes back from.